My name is Silas. I'm 45 years old, and I was a man living a life he thought was perfect. My marriage to Cynthia, 43 years old, was 2 decades old. We had built a comfortable, predictable world. I was proud of what we had achieved. This trip, our 20th anniversary celebration, was supposed to be the capstone, a grand gesture of love and commitment. But for the last 6 months, a small, cold certainty had been growing in my gut. It wasn't a suspicion. It was a feeling that had turned into a fact I couldn't ignore. It was the way she looked at her phone, the sudden late nights, the brittle excuses, the feeling of being completely alone when she was right beside me. 3 months ago, I had decided to stop guessing. I called Marcus, a private investigator who used to be a friend of mine on the police force. I told him what I needed. I didn't want guesswork or half-truths. I needed absolute, undeniable proof. I needed photos, dates, receipts, and a name. Marcus was expensive, but he was the best. He knew how to get things done quietly and completely. This anniversary trip, the expensive flight to the Maldives, the luxury resort, it was all a setup, my final test. I had a sealed manila envelope hidden in the bottom of my carry-on bag. It wasn't a collection of love letters. My anniversary gift to her was going to be the truth. The truth delivered with maximum impact. We were on the plane, settled into the huge, comfortable seats of first class for the 14-hour flight. Cynthia was acting like a teenager on her first vacation. Her cheerfulness felt too loud, too bright, like a piece of glass that was ready to shatter. It was a forced, brittle happiness, and it grated on my last nerve. She kept her phone clutching her hand, almost like a security blanket, or maybe a dangerous weapon. She didn't look out the window at the clouds. She just kept tapping away at the screen with a small, secret smile. The plane took off, pushing us back into our seats. But my mind was already racing forward. Halfway over the Atlantic, the cabin lights were dimmed for the long, overnight portion of the flight. That's when she made her move. "I'm just going to freshen up," she said, giving me a quick, fake smile. She excused herself to the bathroom at the front of the cabin. I nodded, my heart starting a heavy, slow pound in my chest. I waited, counting the seconds. She had been gone for almost 8 minutes when she finally returned. She was settling back into her seat, adjusting the airplane blanket and tucking it around her legs. She was comfortable. For 1 second, and only 1 second, she placed her phone face up on the small armrest between us. That second was all I needed. I reached out a hand, not even looking at her, and quickly hit the power button on the side of the phone. The lock screen immediately lit up with the bright, harsh glare of a notification. It was a text message. The contact was simply labeled J. The words were clearly visible, floating above a generic background image. It was a 3-word sentence. The words were, "I wish he was here." My blood did not just run cold. It felt like it had been instantly turned into ice. The he was not me. There was no other possible way to read that text. I took a deep, shaky breath that I immediately regretted. I slowly replaced the phone exactly where it had been resting on the armrest, making sure not to disturb the blanket or the angle. The second she touched her phone, she'd never know I had seen it. I spent the next 4 hours sitting right next to her in the comfortable silence, plotting. The final, public downfall of my wife had begun. She would not get off this plane intact. I knew the biggest advantage I had was a captive audience. We were packed together, thousands of feet in the air, with no escape for anyone. Everyone was bored, looking for any distraction from the long journey. I needed to use that to my full advantage. I slowly unbuckled my seatbelt and stood up. I needed a clear head and a plan that would ensure maximum exposure. I walked the long aisle up to the galley where the flight attendants were gathered. I spoke to a senior flight attendant, a kind woman with a tired but pleasant face. I told her the lie. "My wife and I are celebrating our 20th anniversary," I said. "It's a huge milestone. I want to make a special, very public announcement for her when we get closer to landing." I smiled, trying to look like a loving, devoted husband. "I've got a surprise presentation planned." The flight attendant seemed completely delighted by the idea, buying the story without any question. "That is so sweet, sir. We'd be happy to coordinate something for you in about an hour," she promised me. I thanked her and returned to my seat. The stage was set. I sat back down and acted as casual as I could. I leaned over to Cynthia. "Hey, hun," I said, my voice smooth and low. "We're almost there. Before we land, can you show me some of your recent pictures? I want to see your most recent snaps from the last few weeks. I want to remember the last few good days before we fly." It was a test, and she failed it instantly. Her eyes narrowed. She immediately clutched the phone tighter. She gave me a flimsy, unbelievable excuse about the battery being almost dead and needing to save the charge for when we landed. I didn't argue or push it. That wasn't the plan. I simply reached into my carry-on bag, the one with a sealed envelope. I pulled out my slim, silver laptop and placed it deliberately on the tray table, the screen facing slightly out towards the seats across the aisle. I then plugged in a small black external hard drive, clicking it into the side port. The light on the drive blinked green. It was a drive that contained all of Marcus's work. I didn't open it yet. I didn't want to tip her off until the last possible minute. I waited. The flight attendant had said an hour, and I will wait an hour. The flight was due to land in exactly 2 hours. That meant it was showtime in 60 minutes. I just sat there, waiting for the clock to strike, watching the movie on the screen in front of me, completely calm, while my wife, the woman I had sworn a lifelong vow to, sat right next to me. The flight attendant came back just as I was mentally preparing myself. She leaned in. "Sir, we're starting our descent in 90 minutes. Would you like to make your announcement now?" she asked. I nodded and gave her a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Now is the perfect time," I said. I knew that everyone was already paying attention to the man getting ready to give his wife a public anniversary surprise. I opened the hard drive on my laptop. The folder was clearly labeled, waiting for me. I double-clicked the folder, anniversary gift. I discreetly clicked play on the first video file in the folder. It was a short video, without sound, but it was absolutely clear. It had a date and timestamp from the private investigator, placed right in the corner. The video was of Cynthia. She was leaving a very specific, very expensive hotel suite. She was laughing, adjusting her clothes, fixing her hair in a quick, guilty movement. I paused the video, making sure the people in the seats all around us could see the screen. I wanted the image to sink into their minds. I wanted them to know what they were seeing. I moved on, clicking the back arrow. I went into the folder with the photo files. I opened the first photo, a crisp, high-resolution picture of Cynthia kissing a man who was clearly not me. It was outside the expensive hotel. The man, Jay, was tall and looked younger than me. The second photo opened immediately after. An intimate dinner, a table set for two. Cynthia smiling a real, genuine smile. The kind of smile she hadn't given me in years. The third file was another short video clip. This one time-stamped just 3 days ago, right before we had left for the airport. It shows Cynthia and Jay holding hands, laughing, and walking in the park that was near my office. The person sitting next to me, an older woman who had been knitting quietly, gasped loudly. It was a sharp, undeniable sound of shock. Cynthia's head snapped up. She had been checking something on her phone. She looked over her shoulder towards the screen. Her eyes went completely wide. The shock was immediately followed by a wave of cold, pure terror on her face. She knew exactly what she was seeing. The game was finally over for her. "What are you doing, Silas?" Cynthia hissed. Her voice was thin and tight with a sudden, immediate fear. She lunged across the armrest, her hand reaching for my laptop, trying to slam the screen shut, trying to make the truth disappear. I was faster. I pulled the laptop away from her grasping fingers, resting it safely on my knee. "I'm showing everyone our anniversary photos, dear," I said, making sure my voice was loud enough. I needed at least 3 rows to hear every single word I was saying. The ones you forgot to share with me. I gave her a cold, hard smile. The people in the first-class cabin were all craning their necks now. They were watching the show, totally hooked. The knitting woman was leaning forward, her eyes glued to the screen. "Stop it right now," Cynthia whispered, her face completely pale. She was begging me, not with her voice, but with her eyes. She was desperate. "No," I said. My voice finally broke the plane's quiet hum. It was loud, thick with years of buried anger and hurt. I spoke the question I had been asking myself for hours. Tell me, Cynthia, when you texted, "I wish he was here," were you talking about Jay? Her silence was the most damning answer she could have given me. It was a heavy, deafening silence that filled the air between us. I know everything, I said, my voice now a low growl. 3 months. A private investigator. This whole Maldives trip was a complete lie for me. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you really think you could keep this secret forever? A man sitting across the aisle from us, a businessman in a suit, loudly said, "Holy hell," he could not have put it better. The truth was out there, thousands of feet in the air, and there was no place on earth for her to hide. The quiet confrontation was finished, and now it was time for the world to see. I knew I couldn't stop now. I stood up, my body towering slightly over the seats. I took the laptop and held it high above my head. The screen was still displaying the newest photo, the one of Cynthia and Jay embracing near my office. I wanted every single person in the cabin to see it. "Attention, everyone," I announced to the entire cabin. My voice was thick with a mixture of pure, cold rage and the deep, wounded hurt that had been rotting in my gut for months. My wife, Cynthia, is celebrating our 20th anniversary by taking a lover. I pointed to the image on the screen, holding it steady. "This is Jay." I waited for the full impact of the words to land. Then I delivered the punchline. "She wishes he was here, and I'm sure he does too. Because he won't be paying for this first-class ticket or the luxury resort we booked." The silence was gone, replaced by a low, shocked murmur that moved through the cabin. The kind, gentle flight attendant who had been so helpful rushed over to me. Her face was completely panicked, all traces of delight gone. "Sir, you need to calm down," she pleaded, reaching out a worried hand. "I am perfectly calm," I said, my voice cutting through her worry. I carefully put the laptop down on the floor where it would not be damaged. Then I reached into my carry-on bag and pulled out the large manila envelope. The moment of maximum exposure was now. I opened the manila envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. This wasn't just about photos and videos. Marcus had been thorough, and I had been planning this for a long time. I hadn't just gotten photos of her cheating. I had gotten everything else. I had printed divorce papers, already filed and stamped. I had copies of bank statements that showed her spending a lot of money on Jay, fancy gifts, expensive dinners, and secret trips. I had printed receipts for the hotel room from the videos and the photos. I handed a printed copy of the final photo, the one of her kissing Jay, to the man next to me, the businessman who had said, "Holy hell." I looked him straight in the eye. "Pass this around," I instructed him. He looked completely stunned by the sheer level of preparation and the suddenness of the drama, but he took the paper. He immediately passed it to the woman behind him, and the photo began its journey through the cabin. Then I looked straight at Cynthia. She had sunk back into her seat, a statue carved of pure terror. "I also brought your gift," I said. I pulled out a single, neatly folded document. It wasn't an anniversary card. It was a legal summons. "This is a court order," I said, making sure every word was sharp and clean. "I filed for divorce this morning, before we left for the airport. It's effective immediately. Your financial access is completely cut off, and your credit cards are all locked. The moment the plane lands, you take a separate cab, and you pay your own way home." She had nothing left. The downfall was total and complete. Cynthia tried to cry, but the tears just would not come. Her face was a mask of pure, distilled panic. She looked completely lost. "Silas, please, don't do this," she begged. Her voice was thin and desperate. "It's already done," I said. There was nothing left to discuss. A passenger from the business class section leaned over the separating curtain to address me. "Sir, I'm a lawyer. Can I get a copy of that photo for you? It's excellent evidence." I nodded, handing him one of the extra copies of the final damning photograph. The cabin was a hive of activity now. The flight attendants were trying their best to calm the situation down, but the passengers were absolutely on my side. They were whispering loudly, pointing at Cynthia, and shaking their heads in disgust at her betrayal. She was utterly ruined in that metal tube, a long way from anyone who could help her. The flight captain made a calm, clear announcement over the speaker, asking the passenger in seat 4 Amperes to cooperate with the cabin crew. I smiled a small, satisfied smile at the flight attendant who was standing nearby. I am cooperating. I said, I'm exposing a fraud. That's cooperation with the truth. I sat back in my seat, the weight of the last 6 months finally lifting off my shoulders. She didn't say another word. She just sat there, waiting for the plane to land, knowing everything she had built was gone. The plane finally finished its long, slow descent. The wheels hit the runway, and there was a cheer from the cabin. But for me, it was the sound of the final bell. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, I stood up. Cynthia made a quick, panicked move to grab her bags from the overhead compartment. Don't touch my belongings, I said, my voice sharp and final. I was not going to give her a chance to steal anything. I took my carry-on bag and the 2 pieces of luggage from the bin above my seat. I had booked everything, the resort, the transport, the return flight, all in my name, with no possible way for her to access any funds or services I had paid for. She was stranded. As I walked down the aisle to the exit, the passengers gave me a mix of sympathetic and impressed nods. A few people even mouthed, "Good for you." I heard one woman say to her companion, "That was amazing. She deserved every second." I kept walking, my step lighter than it had been in years. Cynthia was left standing in the aisle, all alone, her face completely defeated. She was abandoned, humiliated, in front of a full plane of strangers, and had no money, no hotel, and no way home but a very expensive international ticket she couldn't afford on her locked cards. The downfall was complete. I walked out of the air-conditioned plane and into the hot, sweet Maldivian heat, a free man. The anniversary trip was utterly cancelled, but the celebration of my new single life had just begun.